We have a quorum, so we can, and it's after 7. Yeah. So let's call the Finance Committee 11-4 meeting to order. So thanks everybody for attending. Again, not a kind of a terribly kind of deep agenda, but things that it will be good to kind of, for us, at least in the second bullet on the subcommittee, it will be good to have some good discussion on that. But I think the first item that we have here is to the water article number 3. And we're gonna have to. You think we have to re-vote on that one too, Bob?
It's kind of a formality, but you guys can decide. For Jackie and Jeff, I didn't send out motions. They might be posted online. I can send them later, but we've handed out tonight the motions for Monday night's town meeting. And those motions, and Laura may have sent them out to town meeting members. She was going to do it yesterday or today. But they just highlight one change. For Article 3 would be change in the name of a capital project. The dollar price is the same in the water enterprise fund. Some of you may have had the misfortune of being down in Walkersbrook when it turned into a geyser.
Yes.
Or a few geysers over a few days. It was a pretty significant event, and the magnitude of it in terms of an emergency was we asked the state through their procurement arm, which is called DCAM, and they approved it within 15 minutes. So we were really grateful that we could do emergency procurement and fix it, right away. Like within an hour or two, we got the contractor in to start working 24 hours a day until it was fixed. And so Jane was still adding up the bills, but it was coming very close to $300,000 for the first round of repairs. And we're hopeful that there won't be any more repairs imminent, but who knows. So what I'm requesting on DPW's behalf is to change it from Emerson Avenue water main work to just generic water main work in case something else goes wrong. So there might be an extra 50 or 100,000 based on what I knew last week from Jane. Walker's Brook is going to need some more attention, and Walker's Brook was not on the capital plan, was never imagined to be a problem. But once they started seeing smaller leaks and started looking at the pipe, they knew it was old, but it was 1890s and it was very thin. All of our 1890 or 1892 stuff around town is very thick. And this was not thick. So we don't have any idea why. They used to, some of those pictures behind me, they dig them by hand. That's how they used to do water mains.
I don't know the underground water arrangement in that area, but with Eaton Lakeview going in the area, was there already a plan to upgrade the water service to service that complex?
There didn't need to be for that, when it was already sufficient in that direction.
Oh, okay.
I'll double check though, because
Because if they're already digging it up anyway, to
Right.
do anything for that,
yeah,
that's a time
and the
to.
300,000, if you drive down there now, you look, it was a relatively short distance. It was
Yeah.
from Market Basket to just beyond Stop and Shop, but
Right.
not the whole length.
Yeah, not even
I can
quite.
see
to the
Bob
state
talking,
as
but
well.
I can't hear anything. You guys are muted in the conference room.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, thank you.
Recording in progress.
We were having a really exciting discussion too. Sorry, I can't.
I can tell.
We're asking to change the label on Emerson Avenue water main work for 400,000, which you guys saw prior. It was actually part of October town meeting in terms of the capital plan. And we had very urgent work needed down at Walker's Brook. So urgent that the state approved it in 15 minutes, which is very unusual for us to do emergency procurement. So last I knew, we had spent in the ballpark of $300,000, maybe a little bit more. And I'm just asking for this town meeting that it be renamed to just water main work so we can pay for that. We could have just waited to April or done something different, but this seems like the most obviously transparent thing is we know we just paid $300,000. We need to find the money. Emerson was not an emergency, it was just to finish work. So by if you will, diverting the money to Walker's Brook and having perhaps 50 or 75,000 left over, Emerson will have to be dealt with one of two ways. If you think back to the water tank discussion, The uncertainty caused by ARPA is actually a good thing in the sense that we will borrow what's called bands or bond anticipation notes, which is temporary borrowing, and you don't pay principal while those bands are out there. So for next year, there will not be a principal payment on the water tank. So that saves a couple $100,000 from what we expected to have to budget if it was passed. Plus, the size was cut down because there's free cash. So that it's possible that Emerson could be put into next year's budget. I don't know yet, it's too soon. But it's also possible it may have to come to April town meeting. Again, the work there wasn't urgent, it wasn't gonna be done till the spring. Asking for it in the fall meant we could have gone out and got stuff bid and done soon in the spring, and this will delay it. But again, it wasn't urgent, it wasn't an emergency like Walker's Brook was. And it didn't feel right to me, since Walker's Brook is somewhat of an unknown and ongoing, to just say, let's ask for both. Let's do 400 of this and 400 of that. It seemed like just repurpose it for now and then see what DPW finds. They have done it. They were also working 24 hours a day for a while. They've done a lot of testing. They've put in different gates, which means when you have a problem, instead of the whole thing going offline, you can start opening and closing gates, which hadn't been there from the 1890s. So they've got the thing about as under control as they could, but you know, when it first started, it was thought to be something small, then it got to be something bigger, and it was fine. Then it got to be something small again somewhere else. So it was one of those, you kept poking and it, you know, would show up somewhere else, and then it just really let go one section. So there was no alternative, because the businesses down there didn't have water for a short period of time, so there's no alternative but to fix it. And it is a little concerning because, you know, we thought we had a pretty good grip on the whole system, and what the shape was in the capital plan goes out 10 years. We actually have 25 years of plans, and this was not on the list, because generally 1890s pipe is very good and lasts a long time. And the only reason otherwise that we've had to replace it or chosen to is because a project was going on. Either the road was going to be paved, or more likely we needed a larger dimension of pipe, which is kind of what Mary Ann was asking about, that the old pipe wasn't big enough. So, you know, so the thing is really just a name change, and then in both in Articles 3 and 4, just changing the name from Emerson to something generic.
This makes it apparent though, if Emerson still needs to be done.
Yeah.
This is almost $1 million in water enterprise funds, right? That was the money that we were so ready to say, let's put more towards the water tank, and now you see, hey, we need $1 million, you know, almost half a million, I'm rounding up, but there's always overage.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an example of why.
Yeah, you're right. We always imagined that sewer was the one we needed to have bigger reserves for, but there's really no way to know. And you know, I double checked, and the reserves in water are just under $6 million, and with the $500,000 for the water tank and this, obviously that brings it down to $5 million. The danger zone is generally 1/3 to 1/2 of an annual budget, which is somewhere between, let's say, $2.5 and $3 million. So there's still a couple $1 million of cushion, but you're right, it can go just like that. You know, when there's a problem, it's not a $50,000 problem, you know, it's a couple $100,000 problem. And we're very fortunate to have the reserves, because if this happened in most communities, they would have to raise rates middle of the year. And Reading did that once, many years ago, because they just didn't have a choice.
Can we possibly think about the Emerson work that's being postponed as being funded by ARPA?
I don't know. I don't see why not, because I think sort of generic water work counts. So, yeah.
If the select board are gonna consider the water tank anyway, and this was postponed for a very unforeseen
And
circumstance, it
it's
perhaps should be
a
on.
good idea, because it's a small, you know, we were looking for to advise the select board, right? The group to advise the select board on smaller
Yeah, there's somebody who
capital
might know.
project.
I would guess yes, it probably would qualify. It's water infrastructure that work. What are they doing in Emerson? I don't remember.
They're finishing a water main replacement program. Oh, there's Jane.
Yeah. I would say that it would qualify.
Yeah, and they are, it's not that it's a critical, but that area is experiencing, you know, discolored water. We're gonna have to we're gonna continue doing flushing and other issues. It's, you know, it's not water quality, but it's not something we can put off forever either.
Yes,
So-
so if ARPA was gonna be considered, which seems like a reasonable idea, we'd have to figure out how to temporarily borrow to get that done until the decision is made. And if it's, work for July 1st or after, we can actually internally borrow from ourselves. We can't do that over a fiscal year, so if we tried to borrow in May, we'd have to do something else for July.
Can you
But that's
explain how that
an
works,
option.
borrowing from ourselves?
Yeah, the select board is asked, usually it's, I don't remember ever doing it for water or sewer, it's been the general fund. But, there'll be sort of a ramp-up period of a project in which we basically borrow our free cash from ourselves and use it, instead of leaving it as free cash, we put it towards a use. And then when the use is permanently financed, the money goes back to free cash. So it's like a temporary borrowing from free cash.
Huh.
And there's rules, you just can't do this, you have to, certain balances, certain amounts. So, we'd have to look to see, Sharon will have to look for water. Because I'm familiar with more how the general fund works, and, when we borrow from the general fund, it's such a small percent of the annual budget that it's okay, even if it's $1 million or $2 million. Just not sure how it would work in water, but it's possible.
Is there interest on that short-term borrowing?
I think we have to pay, do we pay ourselves? No, we don't.
No, we don't pay any interest, it's just borrowing from ourselves at 0%.
And it's
I just have to make sure it's paid off by June 30th. I can't let an internal borrowing go past June 30th.
Got
So how much roughly do we have on the capital plan, like going out 10 years for water
Well,
replacement?
let's look.
Is that,
Did you say one time it was 10 million or something?
In the
That,
general.
no, that's unfunded though, 3
Yeah.
years.
Let's see, sewer and, water has 40 million in the next 10 years, both debt and capital. Actually, it's maybe 12 years. So it's, roughly 3.5 declining a year. And that's principal and interest, not just principal.
so 40 million?
Where are you? Sorry. A page
On-
number?
On page 28 of the warrant report.
Clearly. Thanks.
For special town meeting or the upcoming one?
November, I lost track. There's just under $6 million of capital over that period of time, and there's about $34 million of debt. Some of it not yet issued and not yet approved.
Okay. And where's that, like, does that reduce most of the exposure, you think, or? Like, is that replacing everything?
I mean, there
all
is-
the 1890 stuff, or, or before?
I'd
or-
say no. Jane can chime in, but we did a consulting firm looked at our water distribution system not long ago, and I want to say we had about 40 million nominally to do whenever we could. And I know there's at least 25 million totally not addressed even in this capital plan, but I think the rest is planned within 10 years or has already been done. So say 15 million has been done or will be done. Was that like 3 or 4 years ago, Jane? Time flies, maybe it was longer.
I know, it doesn't seem, but I think it actually was about 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, this one, kind of came out of nowhere, so you never know. And it wasn't necessarily to replace sort of old water mains, it's mains that you had some issues with and some indication or some need to change the size or do something else. For instance, in the downtown, there's a lot of development, we knew we had to expand the capacity. And a lot of it was focused on the downtown that we're currently doing.
And is that lead or cast iron, or what?
What we had was cast iron on what, Parkersburg, yeah. We don't generally, wait if there's if it's falling apart type of thing. It's more, like Bob said, for the downtown, it was to meet and the growing need of the businesses and whatnot. So this just came out of nowhere, to be honest with you.
And that's pretty rare too, isn't it, Gene? That hasn't happened very much there, yeah.
Not in Reading.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, and that's what was like so surprising. And they spent a good couple of weeks and about, roughly about 40-something thousand between materials and labor, just fixing it, thinking, all right, we're gonna be able to do this, but every few days it would split and break, and it was, it would get to the point that it just was beyond the capacity. And like I said to Bob, it was getting, to me, dangerous, because there was same crew of guys, they have to be water, certified, that were working around the clock at different times, It's not worth it.
Yeah, I actually think to Mary Ann's point, it's a reminder about the importance of reserves. That no matter how well managed you are, no matter how well you think things, stuff happens, and you need to be financially prepared to deal with it, so
Yep.
sobering in that way.
Ask about questions from your.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, so, Jackie or Jeffrey, just because I can't see it, is there any questions for you two, from you two?
No?
No, not here.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? All right, so then, let's take them in order.
The other Jackie has some draft motions if you want her to read them and then you to agree.
That sounds great. Jackie, do you have those?
Jackie LaVerne.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I'm gonna actually share them. Hold on just a sec.
Okay.
Thanks, Jackie. Oh, hey, Mark.
There's one.
Is Andrew still on income?
He is. I haven't heard from him. Yeah, I know he was dealing with something. He was sick for a while, but
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
We haven't
I
seen him
haven't-
since July.
I know I haven't.
Actually, Jackie, it's easier if you share the email I sent you, so you could just probably read the motions. Or I could read it. I sent it to you. I should be able to find it, shouldn't
It's a,
I? That's how email works.
I've got it right here. So the first one is move to approve the changes to Article 3 and vote to recommend to town meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Eric.
You're gonna have to roll call.
Yeah, I'll have to roll call.
I just want to clarify, the one change we're making is changing Emerson Avenue water main work to the label water main work.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay, so we'll do the roll call. I'll start with the folks online. Jackie McCarthy,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes?
Mark,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
and Ed, yes. 8-0.
And then Article 4 is the same thing, it's just crossing out, you just changed the capital plan tree, and this is just crossing out Emerson Ave and substituting in water main work.
Right.
You want me to read that again?
Sure.
Move to approve the changes to Article 4 and vote to recommend to town meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Eric. Jackie McCarthy,
Yes.
thanks, Jackie. Mark,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Ed, yes. So that
Thank
passes 8-0. Hey, so, quick question on, just on town meeting, for Monday. Will we have, do you know if we'll have, stuff under Articles 1 or 2, or would we start with 3?
One of them is instructional motions, which will be at the end, and I really don't know. I think maybe there's at least one. The deadline is tomorrow, so we'll see. And the reports, there will not be any, that was just written, so there will not be any business under that article.
So we'll definitely start with these two.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as far as I know, we're going in order, going through.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Good to know.
I had just a, I guess I'm supposed to go through the chair. If something is sponsored by FinCom, like Article 4, does that mean we're supposed to give a presentation on it or something?
No, there's just, I don't remember honestly if it's charter or general law, but there's two financial articles that FinCom must always sponsor the budget.
Oh,
And
okay.
any changes to the budget. Strangely enough, the capital plan, the select board does, don't ask me why, but maybe this is Peter making that up, but I did read that somewhere. So that's just somewhat of a formality. The select board knows that you've requested it.
Oh, okay.
Honestly, if anyone requested it, any board or committee requested it, it could either appear as their name or the select board on behalf of, or just the select board. But the two, anytime the budget is touched, it's the finance committee. I think it might be in the charter.
Yeah. No, it came up just because when I watched something the other night on CPTC where they were saying they would not be allowed to present on the zoning bylaws. And
Yeah.
they're not the sponsor
They
of
really
it, but,
meant Article 9, I think. Well,
so
actually.
Article 9 is Mary Ellen
Mary Ellen.
O'Neill's, but there's Article 6 is amend section
No,
4.6.
they will definitely speak for that. I think what they meant is under reports, they wanted to give a report. There is a written report. They
Oh,
also
I
thought they
see.
could speak. And Alan asked everyone to just submit a written report. And they wanted to speak to Article 9, and obviously they'll be able to do that under Article 9.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know how the discussion appeared on TV, but that was the intent.
Yeah, no, I watched it and then I thought, and I asked in my precinct meeting, because that's when I saw FinCom, I said, oh, the sponsor gives the presentation, but I must have misunderstood.
Yeah, no, it could be a number of boards that want to give a presentation. You know, perhaps one must, but many could speak.
Now, is that different than what we do at April town meeting, when the chair gives their,
Yeah, it is. Well, again, that would be under reports. I can't remember, I think that's Article 2 in April. So typically, the chair of the select board and FinCom give two separate verbal reports or perhaps visual reports.
yeah, gotcha.
For the last couple springs, those were written only also.
Yep.
And then in November, it's typically RMLD and the schools, and that's others as needed, like the permanent building committee, I'm pretty sure wants to do on next April.
Oh, okay.
And update them on, update town meeting on all the buildings that they're studying and what's going on, which would be good.
Cool. All right, good. So I just, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is discuss and vote to establish a FinCom ARPA subcommittee. And so, everyone got this in the packet from Jackie, correct? So yeah, actually, you must have, 'cause this is where I got it. I printed it out. So, and I think, Eugene, correct me if I'm wrong, so even we already have a name change for it already.
Yeah, I think I have two proposed, before we discuss it, there's two proposed changes. So a little bit of history on the title. This was originally conceived of as an ARPA group. And then there were some discussions among leadership of the select board school committee and mostly Ed and a little bit myself about maybe there needs to be a wider focus, right? We've got some excess free cash, we should be looking at that, should we be looking at the whole capital plan, should we be looking at everything? And that sort of became sort of the thinking, and I think we're now back to like, we have ARPA funds, they're very time sensitive, they're very specific into what we can and can't use them for. It might be better to focus on that first. I also think a challenge is until this group gets around the table, it's really, you can't have the conversation till the group is formed. So you can't make some decisions. So the current thinking is that this really would be focused on the ARPA subcommittee. I think at the same time, the FinCom is gonna have some discussions around free cash. there may be a decision, I think, that we have some excess free cash we can use. Those conversations might impact the work of this subcommittee, so I think it's a little bit fluid in that way. But I think the name that sort of is rising that school committee and select board chair are comfortable with is an ARPA subcommittee. So I think that's where we landed. With the understanding that the scope, as the group works, may change a little bit, but if it does, we're gonna come back to all parties involved and say, hey, we think we should include X, Y, and Z, so. Does that make sense? And the only other change that I think I'm aware of is under November, it says, the chair of FinCom, chair of select board, chair of the school committee. The thought was that we wanna give those boards complete flexibility to nominate 2 or 3 people as it's listed appropriately. So we're gonna remove the word chair and just say 2 members of the select board, 2 members of the school committee, 3 members of FinCom, and not require that the chair serve in the event that a chair thinks there's another member who could better do the job.
Yep.
Or more willing or capable or able to do the job with scheduling and whatnot. I think that's it. So maybe, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna move to form, we can have a discussion after I move it, but I'm gonna move to propose the ARPA subcommittee with the 2 amendments I just made, the 2 changes I just made. And if there's a second, we can kind of dive into the discussion. Does that work?
That works.
Anyone wanna second that?
Second.
Thanks, Joe. All right, move it to discussion now.
I can start. We have to plan our debt issuance, which is gonna be around December 1st. And we were just talking about it again today. I think the most sensible thing is that we issue a bond anticipation note for the water tank that matures either July or August 2023, which gives this group ample time, quite a lot of time, to have the discussion. But that's an important deadline. You know, a decision must be made before that because we need to know how to refund the $2 million. Either we borrow it permanently or we borrow a portion of it or none of it.
So how does, working back from, if you borrow till that time, working backwards from there, what's the typical time frame?
We'd only really need to know 30 or 60 days before that. And you know, when we issue, we'll get you the final date. That's the plan though. So, you know, tentatively, there's a couple things on the spring of 2023 town meeting warrant, at least in my mind, that could be debt authorizations, and those would tie into then we need to make a decision on the water tank in terms of issuing at the same time. And the wild card is killing. You know, I've been a part of some meetings with the SBA, and believe me, it's still just in the discussion stage, but we have to think about these things. The soonest I heard, a likelihood of asking the voters would be the spring of 2023. So potentially, we could be asking the voters then, or it could be later. And that might also be a debt authorization, you know, most likely a debt exclusion.
So I'm really happy to hear that timeframe because this was originally conceived with a final decision by November of 2022 town meeting. And I actually should stop there. Town meeting doesn't really have a role in ARPA funds. What I like about this and I just want to express my gratitude to the chair of the select board and school committee. There's a real desire to work all together. And so I think having town meeting brought in this way is really smart. But a question I had here for tonight, Bob, was if this is an aggressive timeframe.
Yeah.
And if we couldn't hit November, if we had to go to April, would that mess anything up? And what I'm hearing is no. But I like when you have a group and you're like, we're shooting for November, but we have till April, but April's a hard stop. So I like that question a lot.
Can I just ask, I wanna make sure I understood you correctly when you said we have to plan a debt issuance related to the water tower for December 1st, 2021?
Yeah, we have to borrow money temporarily
So-
until we know whether there's gonna be.
So the
ARPA.
reason why we have to know about that now as FinCom and as a town is because we have to know how much debt to issue and how much might come from ARPA? Is that what you mean?
Not now, but when the short-term borrowing we do, that's tentatively planned to be, say, 18 months, when that comes due, then you have to know. And that's July of 23-ish.
So you're gonna issue something now, expecting that this group
The
will
decision will be
confirm that 2.5 million split, how much of it comes from ARPA?
So it will either be ultimately funded by ARPA or some amount of it, the rest would be permanent debt,
Right.
15-year, right?
Yep.
And did you say this was just water tank, or was there anything else in the BA?
There's other things being issued in December. Some stuff was approved a while ago, the Parker roof, the stadium turf, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, the police station.
Would those all be part of the, I already forget what BAN stands for?
No, they will all be permanently issued because there's no uncertainty for anything except the water tank.
So that's
So
my
it's-
question,
yes,
the
the
ban
ban-
is just the water tank?
Right.
Okay, got it.
And like, the only challenge is like, there's a small risk the rates will go up, but it's only on 2 million, right? So it's not.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
That's a
Well, I was
good
gonna
point.
say, I also thought the legislator threw us a happy wild card today, because what they said, where they're leaning towards in distributing some of the federal funds, is towards water infrastructure. So, like, it could be a happy surprise that gives you a third option for funding.
Yeah.
I asked for 2 million and I was told, come on, we might get 100,000.
Sounds
So,
like it
I
would be
asked.
better going towards.
And you never know,
water.
you never know, it could be more, but that's the last I heard.
Do we have a time frame on those decisions?
No, not beyond that press release that I shared today.
Before you guys decide, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I gotta think they're gonna,
They probably have a similar time frame, yeah?
they
Think so.
have the same rules, I guess I'll say, but they probably wanna decide sooner because their decisions are more complex. And they wanna get the money put to work fast, that's.
And just so I'm clear, based on what we did, and I can't believe I've already forgotten about it since we spent so much time talking about it at town meeting, but for the water tank, we did we already say that we'd use water reserves? Yeah, so we're down to 2 million
Right.
between debt or ARPA.
Right.
Right, so I think somebody tried to move to use $1 million of water reserves, but it went back to the
That went-
500K that we
It did.
proposed originally, and now
It's
we're
just-
seeing with Walker's Brook and everything is gratuitous.
Yeah.
Can you, it might be a Sharon question, but can you remind me if there's an absolute hard deadline of April 2023 town meeting to have a decision on ARPA funds use? How does that work with the ARPA? I know there's a 2024 deadline that's in my head.
Remember, Sharon, is it December 2024?
It's December 31st, 2024. We have
December
to,
31st.
the money has to be encumbered. It doesn't have to be paid out. So I think that they give you that extra time. I think it's December 2026, expecting some projects are long-term projects, but they want you to have them contracted by that date.
And spent by December 2026.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're not looking at,
So the
10-year
select board would
projects.
have to decide, just to give it a little safety, summer of 2024.
yeah,
Which would be a year after this portion of it would have a deadline.
summer of 2026.
No, they have to decide before
Just
2024.
add spend.
Where
Oh,
are you
I've got
getting-
you what you're
yeah, I
saying.
was just
I've
gonna
got your
say,
saying.
where
Yeah,
are
yeah,
the
yeah.
spending by 2026?
When Sharon said encumber, that means the board has to fully decide
Yeah.
exactly
They have
which
to
projects.
contract.
And they have to
Yeah.
be approved by the feds. And then the spending could go out as long as 2026. So you might say, we're gonna do this thing in a year, but we have to decide now, and then they either get approved or disapproved.
Yeah, the project would be approved at that point. By December 31st, 2024, we should have a contract in place for all projects that we're going to move with ARPA funds. And hopefully have an approval, an idea that it's actually going to be approved. But then we could spend it for 2 more years, as these projects tend to, span a couple of years, especially if the work can only be done in like the summer.
So that's something I think that this group is gonna have to dive into a little bit, because you bring up a good point. It needs to be encumbered by December 31st, but to your point, that the feds have to approve it at some point before that, you need a contract. So it really isn't December, at some point before December. So this group should put together some project plan along those lines. Do you know, Sharon, if the federal government determines that a project we wanna do does not qualify under ARPA funds, if we had the time under this, can you go back and say, okay, we're gonna do this instead? Or is it sort of you have your one chance and they just say no and you?
No, you could, as long as it's before that December 31st, 2024, you could opt to use the money for something else, yeah.
Which is another reason to
You
get
go
ahead
back
of
to
the
the drawing
deadlines.
board and say, okay, you don't like that project, how about this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful.
But just keep in mind that the whole country will have the same deadline. And
It's gonna be hard,
one would
yeah.
suppose the federal government doesn't have infinite resources to make decisions. So the sooner the better, in other words.
Yeah, I think you get it out there sooner rather than later, just so that you can get your answer about whether or not they think that falls in line with the grant itself.
How soon do you think the group would decide on the town-school split, if any? Because I'm looking at the school committee agenda tonight, and they're supposed to be discussing probably as we speak, ARPA, full-day kindergarten budget strategy. Like they're counting their chickens before, you know, whatever. That just seems like it's getting ahead of the game. They don't even, I know they'll have a plan in place, but we don't, this other group, whenever they're gonna decide, I don't know. Cause then when you're talking about the 2026 fiscal years, I'm thinking, well, yes, even if they're waiting and we say yes, you know, 1 or 2 fiscal years from now, what much are they going to do if they have to also spend whatever share they have by 2026? They can't say, oh, let's hoard some money and supplement full-day K for 5 years to get it going.
Yeah.
They're on a time, it just doesn't make sense.
They could do the 5 years if they already started, which I think one of the community did, but they can't do 5 years, 3 years from now.
Yeah.
They can only do 2 years at that point.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm not understanding the full-day kindergarten, because those are costs that are going to be reoccurring year after year. A lot of the guidance we've been given is to select things that are more like one-time items, because they're going to create a cliff that they have to now find a way to fund when the funding goes away. Am I not understanding something?
No, you're understanding it.
I think that they saw Holliston, said they were gonna do this, and I have no idea if Holliston had something going already, and they were inspired by that to try to make a plan. That's what I saw in their past presentations.
So, I have a couple reactions to this.
And it was a former member.
Yeah, well, yeah, I actually care a lot about the school budget. I think that obviously there's a lot of excitement, and this is a tremendous opportunity for the town, right? Like, it's exciting to have this opportunity. So I understand why the school committee and a lot of individuals, a lot of us are like, oh, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna invest in the money? So I think the discussion is really coming from an enthusiasm that there's a potential to solve a big problem this community's had for a very long time. So I get that. I am hopeful that the group, before we even delve into, if you look at this project plan, step 1 isn't let's talk about what we're gonna do with the money. Step 1 is to your point, Sharon, how are we gonna make good decisions? And this should be part of that discussion. Is sustainability important to this community? Is it important that we use one-time money on one-time purposes? Or have a plan to phase out the operating budget? That's a conversation the group is gonna have and is gonna have to be a discussion. Oh, I love that song. So I think you're bringing up a really valid point. I think what I'm hopeful is that we can get together and sort of say, how should we make this decision? And I think sustainability, to your point, has to be part of the discussion. So hopefully, so then the next step, if you look at this project plan, which I'm sure you all read, the next step is then you brainstorm. Should we do full day K? Should we talk about the Birch Meadow complex? The field house has been on the capital plan forever. Water work, we've been talking about water infrastructure. Help me out, there's a million great ideas. So then you do that list, and then once you have that list in front of you, then you go back to what you said you were gonna make the decision based on and say, how many of the boxes does this project check? And I'm hopeful and optimistic that we can get to some good decisions using that plan. But I think you bring up a really fair point. I definitely do.
So I was at a previous school committee meeting where they were talking about ARPA funds in that way, and I mentioned Sharon's point that it had to be encumbered by the 2024 date. So they were kind of thinking that to spread the ARPA out over several years. But when I said encumbered, and the new finance director said, yeah, but we don't encumber salaries. So they did kind of say, okay, we may need to go back to the drawing board on this. Well, they're doing that now, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I think, kind of a part of this whole discussion, is this other concept, that Sharon just mentioned too, that we discussed to figure out applicability, for ARPA. You know what I mean? So that's all, whether, and I think that might be fluid, as it goes along. I know there's, there'll be, there's a set of guidelines now, but I also think that we'll get additional data points as we go along, as other towns, communities put forth projects and get approved or, disapproved, or rejected, I guess is the right word. You'll have other data points to say, okay, well, these things are in scope or are not gonna be in scope. And so I think those are, all, kind of important pieces in that prioritization that you go through.
And I think that I totally agree with you, and I think the gray area there is, my guess is it's not gonna be, and Sharon, jump in if you disagree, but I don't think it's gonna be a yes or a no. I think it's gonna be yes, absolutely, absolutely no, and I think there's gonna be projects that are gray. And I think the gray, doesn't mean we say no to it, but it's a strike against it, because you want those projects that the federal government is gonna be just like, yes, go for it.
Has somebody already made a list of like no-brainer, these absolutely qualify, like?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, not that I've seen either at this point, but I think that's kind of what I think that's to some degree what I think the hope is, from whether it's members of the select board, members of the school committee, as they do their prep, as they start to think about it, okay, well, here's, everyone's gonna kind of come with stuff.
But like the town, like your capital list is probably, somebody could sit there with this highlighter and make check marks, yes. And that might be a great starting point. I don't know who I delegate that to.
That would be Sharon.
But no, I completely agree with you. What is the stuff we're gonna pay for anyway? If it can be covered by these funds, all you're doing is opening up capital a year or two down the road that you can use.
That could really simplify the prioritization.
Yeah.
If you say, oh my God, look, we've already used it up on one page.
Yeah.
And what that does, for instance, I'll just take a guess, maybe Birch Meadow wouldn't be paid by ARPA, but if something else is, then that something else's money can go to Birch Meadow.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
I think your matrix idea is a great idea, and one of them is kind of odds of being approved, or something like that.
That's the
high
gray.
voting law, yeah.
Actually, that's a good way of putting it. Like,
Yeah.
no-brainers get the highest marks. The further gray it is, the less.
Would that
the
be
more-
easy for the public to follow too, to weigh in on?
Yep.
Once we set things,
Because Sharon can look at the capital plan and tell you a lot of no's.
Sure.
Mhm.
A truck.
But to
sorry.
your point, when you find the yeses in there, you're opening up money for the no's to fund other
Absolutely.
ways. So it's not that they don't get funded, they just get funded through a different mechanism.
So the conference I had gone to, or so many conferences about this, they talk about trying to stay away from the gray. But if you are going in the direction of the gray, to definitely get guidance from the Treasury and your auditors about whether or not they feel that you're going in the right direction. Because sometimes they're not going to have time to look at everybody's projects. You may not get an answer from them right away. They say the safer bet is to go towards projects that are absolutely yes. And stay away from the gray if you can. Like, you can find projects within what you're going to do that are absolutely yes, and that saves you money that you can do the other things that might have been gray. Do it that way. So I think that where everybody's got this money, I would assume that there's going to be a delay in getting answers from the Treasury when you're trying to throw out ideas for projects. And the auditors are definitely going to be a resource for us, but in the end decision is the Treasury if they want it to go through or not. So I feel like staying with things that are very black and white. They do have a lot of literature out there that points you in the direction of what they were thinking when they developed the grant. And there are definitely going to be things that are in the gray that are going to be hard to sell.
Sharon, I hate to add work to your plate, but I really liked Ed's point about, do you have a network where you could kind of monitor what other communities are doing that would give us a little bit, I really like that idea of like, oh, this community applied for X and it went right through, and so we know that project is likely to get passed, or the similar thing was applied for by a different community and they were a hard no, let's take it off the table. Do you have a network that could kind of informally or formally keep us up to speed on that? Because I'd be interested to know what's getting through.
On a daily basis, I get emails through the MMAAA, which is the Mass Municipal Auditors and Accountants Association, and people are constantly asking, what are we using these funds for? And I think a lot of cities and towns are still in the beginning planning stages, But I suspect that we will start to hear more and more people have a plan in place and what they've been told about the projects they've proposed. So I think as time moves on, we're going to have more and more information. Right now, I see a lot of people asking the question and a lot of answers coming back. So I think it's kind of early in the game, but I think that we will see a lot more answers coming through the network of people that do what I do, who are looking for those answers from their public. What are we going to use these funds for? And going through that process of trying to get an idea if it's a project that will absolutely go through or if it's a project that could be in the gray zone. But I definitely think our auditors are a great resource. This is a federal grant. It will absolutely be audited by our auditors. And so we were told to send, our thoughts to our auditor and get their thoughts to start up our projects. That would be a quick way to get some feedback on what we're thinking and tell us if they think we're going in the right direction.
That's great. Oh, I just wanted to make one more statement. I think in a sort of ideal world, if we all had unlimited time and open schedules, sort of the ideal would be the full select board, the full school committee, the full finance committee, and honestly, all of town meeting and all of staff. Like, it'd be great if everyone could be at the table, but it's just not practical. But this being a subcommittee of the FinCom, they're open meetings. So, each group is gonna have to pick a few voting members to sit at the table and have the discussion and take votes on recommendations, but everyone can come. So the whole FinCom can be involved in all these discussions, the whole select board can be, and hopefully, I think we've already had some discussions about how you engage town meeting. We'd love to see town meeting members there. They know the budget as well as any of us. So hopefully it's as inclusive a conversation. Anyone who wants to participate, hopefully feels very welcome to do so.
Oh, yeah, agree.
As your group forms, I'd highly recommend you get a meeting schedule put together of some sort.
Yeah.
Through April 1st, you can use Zoom. After then, you can't. Right now, it may change. So you're gonna want a space plan out for your meetings after April 1st in larger venues. This won't be large enough, is my guess. Maybe right away it would be, but at some point, you're gonna probably wanna be like in the library conference room.
Yeah.
Or at one of the school larger rooms.
And I do think, we have the chair of the select board here, but I don't think the select board has bandwidth. To your point, Marion, you had asked when this group is gonna form. I don't think the select board has bandwidth till the new year. Is that right? Sorry to throw you on the spot. Yeah. So I think in the next 2 months, the select board will hopefully be selecting 2 people to join the committee. The school committee will be picking 2 people. We'll kind of get the group assembled. To Bob's point, we'll do some emails about how often do we meet. I'm thinking every 2 weeks to start, and then maybe after 2 meetings a month. I don't know.
I mean, even us, we're gonna be stuck with budget season and
Yeah.
all those meetings.
Yeah.
And I don't see anyone having time until at the end of January, once budgets all go through.
But I still think we get the group formed, right? Like, we can start kind of getting it on people's radar, and to Bob's point, get space plan for meetings and that sort of thing. But I don't think the group's gonna start their work until early in the new year.
Also, another MMA group, so Sharon, I didn't realize the auditors was also an MMA group, but Mass Municipal Association, they are already getting ready to share information on ARPA projects for select boards, for finance committees, for the other boards they do. So 2 MMA associations, and that's where Senator Lewis's office directed me as well when I was asking questions. But that gives us more time. I definitely agree with your earlier point that, it's okay, let everyone else go first, and we're gonna learn from their lessons.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's, that's, you have to kind of operate, within, the time constraints that you have. But I think it's also, and I think, from what Marianne was saying, we already have projects that are specific to Reading that we've already identified, that are there. So I think that's, that should inform us. There may be other things that are, in the ether that's, maybe not on a plan, but something that's, that's important to, kind of on one committee or board or another. But I think also what, hopefully you get to a point where when we start meeting in any kind of cadence, then you're gonna have other, kind of data points coming from other towns, communities that will be able to, to kind of influence what things that are available. And, and so, and again, hopefully at the end of the day, we're able to use all of the, all of the funds, and it allows us to either speed up other projects, or, so you can kind of get a boost, not just in the number of projects that you do, but when you do them.
I think another thing you should put near the beginning of your committee is to sort of discuss the philosophy of ratepayer versus taxpayer. Taxpayers have very limited spending because of Prop 2.5. Ratepayers have as much tolerance as the select board does for raising rates. But, never mind the school-town split, it's enterprise general fund. You gotta tackle that split. Should any money be given to this one, should it all go here, or whatever, there's no answer, it's just a discussion.
And going back to this idea of calendaring, while I appreciate there's other stuff happening, we may not be able to begin until January or February. I feel very motivated to start in January or February, because if we don't, we're gonna miss the opportunity to bring this up at April town meeting. And we have to talk to the moderator, I don't know if he would agree, but I would really like to be able to at town meeting say this group is formed, here's our process. I think you really miss an opportunity if you don't do that, because then town meeting doesn't meet again until November. So that's sort of, in my mind, a really big milestone. Even if town meeting's update in April is the group is formed, here are the members, here's the charge, here's the project plan. Ideally, here's the decision matrix, but if not, come to the meeting where we're doing the decision matrix, so I'm really hoping.
Yeah, just again, I think, given all of the other timeframes where you're working back from, 26, 24, as far as, those go, I'd rather not have town meeting really kind of hear about this to them directly, until November.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or like over the summer through the grapevine.
Yeah, and granted, it'll be open meeting, these will all be open meetings, but I can only speak before I was a finance committee member. I did not pay attention to any of that stuff as a town meeting member, so, and maybe I shouldn't admit it to that, but I do think it's, to the extent that, that we can, it's a large enough window where I think we can do a couple things to be able to hit April.
Can I ask a question?
Of
So
course, Mary.
when I'm looking at for April town meeting and even November, it says, I don't know if we change this agenda, share expectation that subcommittee will present spending plan for ARPA and excess free cash. Now, have we defined what is the excess free cash?
No.
No.
And that's completely a finance committee discussion, ultimately a town meeting decision.
I mean, yeah, that's gonna be a whole other meeting, because I guess we have to decide, okay, what's what we need and what's excess.
Yep. And included in that, I'd like to have a conversation about a stabilization fund, whether we should be utilizing that more than we are. So,
Yeah, the thing is, the excess free cash isn't tied to the ARPA limits, we can spend it on whatever the community wants.
Yep.
But we have to know what excess means, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, again, as we kind of debated as far as, definitely ARPA is the catalyst. Like, we wouldn't have this subcommittee discussion without ARPA, but then limiting it solely to ARPA, there's other things that are in play. So, so it was one of those things, well, as you start to go through this list, again, maybe there's things that are hard no's. Well, okay, but they're really important. You know what I mean? So,
Well, it's like where they'll come in with the full day K, though, you can't just have that as an ongoing expense either, but if they have a plan for, look, if you give us this much, we can get
exactly.
going.
So I think that really that there's that was really the thought process. Not to make kind of free cash or anything else the focal point, but it's on the periphery. More from that perspective, and it very well may not come into play within this subcommittee. Maybe a little bit less, but for us, it should be bigger. You know what I mean? And so and that's where I think there's a there's a lot of overlap
Right,
between
and
what we
there's
do.
no time limit on the free cash either.
No, there,
Like ARPA, I mean, there's no
right, yeah, no
deadlines.
deadlines,
Constraints is the word, I mean.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I will say that I feel from town, I'd be interested to other FinCom members if you feel the same way, but I feel from town meeting a kind of sense of, wow, we have a lot of free cash, what's the plan? And to your point, I think it'd be really good to be able to say, look, we have a 7% policy and this we're gonna keep, and it's in a stabilization fund or it's not, and here's why. And then we're using $2 million a year to supplement the operating budget, and we have to do that on an ongoing basis. How much is gonna regenerate? How did we plan that? Like, how much are we keeping precisely to maintain the operating budget, and what's left over? So I don't have answers to any of that, but I sense from town meeting a desire to have some clarity on that.
I think that's and I don't know if this is just something I read in the chat room or if I actually heard it on town meeting, but there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
You know, because, and again, I completely understand it, I feel strongly about it, you know, we're in a better position, whether it's to how the town's managed or whatever, but we did an override, a few years ago, we're now in this situation, and then so, and again, I think it's, people see that number and they may not understand outside of the top line what it means. I see 17, well, it's not, there's more to it, to that, and I think that's, part of what we wanna be able to do, and hopefully that gets to the town meeting, and then from town meeting to the rest of the voters, and, but that, I think that is really kind of a key point to it, and I think one of the things that, I kind of take as a charge that we just should do, to have more transparency towards that, and have more education towards that, because I think it's, hopefully, that makes everyone a little bit more informed, so some of these things can be more easily digested.
Well, one of the things, and I don't know if it's too late for November town meeting, I've tried to informally explain this to people when people say, well, how come we have 17? And I kind of try to say, okay, what's my elevator pitch? I feel like 3 or 4 million of that is mysterious COVID luck. Like, we didn't spend the money, we took in more than we needed, we got these grants. That's never gonna happen again. And that's just how I tell them. I'm like, we were at like at 13 and 14, then COVID hit, we weren't spending, we got grants, and all of a sudden we have $3 or $4 more million, and this is like, don't keep expecting.
Don't plan on that happening again.
Right,
Yeah.
so, I mean, with all the inflation and increased costs of things, in another year or two in budgets, we may be screaming operational override again, and people are gonna say, what happened to the 7 million?
Right.
17 million,
Yep, and so if there can be, to Ed's point, a really clear, this is free cash, here's why we have it, here's the
But
use
tell
of different
how,
tranches
tell how
of
we
it.
got there, kind of like the way Sharon explained
Yeah.
at the forum, but maybe to town meeting members, just really quickly to say, look, this, and shape a nice color chart. This stuff is what?
Bob's already seeing it in his
A
head,
nice
I can
picture,
see it.
yeah.
He's got the colors picked.
This is like the magic extra that we didn't expect, and you know that curve of the free cash, the bar chart of the free cash, which I like, and what we had this sudden jump, and this is why it's gonna go down, because this was just miracle money.
Yeah.
Or
And I
whatever
think
you wanna call it.
To your point about like what is excess, I don't know the answer to that, and we should. This committee should advise town meeting, we have maybe $1 million we can spend, maybe it's more than that, I don't know, but that's work I think we should do.
Yeah, and I think if they understand, it'll help everybody know what we can before people start planning on all these things to do with it too, what's sustainable and not.
Yeah, no, and
'Cause we understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that, probably, ambitious for November, but, as part of whatever we put together for April's, kind of finance, report, that'll, instead of me just copying what Eric wrote the year before, I'll actually have something, kind of more,
Copy what Mark wrote.
yeah, right. I wasn't gonna, I was never gonna say that, but yeah.
Scripture, just
That's right. You gotta make sure you get the dates right.
Right.
That's, just switch for the dates. But I do think that's, I really like that point as far as, okay, well, there's, that's a kind of a good meaty portion of what you can inform town meeting.
Yeah, because it was told in the financial forum, and we've had 2 of them, and I think it was alluded to more in the second than the first, but not everybody saw that. There's the boards, but the greater group of people, and by spring it may be, with the new elections, it may be a new mix of people too.
No, I think that's, it's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, sure.
And from past discussions with Alan, this is a discussion that's hard to put in front of town meeting. It doesn't apply to an article.
Right.
Well, it
So
applies
you
to
might
the
get away with a
budget.
certain amount of it for reports, and you might get away with a certain amount of it for an overview of a budget. from the past, you know, he said you can't discuss an override unless you tie it to an article. So if you want to put an article about an override,
Yeah, and I
For
don't know how you
instance.
just kind of say, here's how we got here.
yeah,
Isn't the
it's just
annual,
tricky, it's just something to think about.
the FinCom report is in April.
Yeah, and that's certainly a sensible time,
Oh,
but
yeah, that
Certainly,
makes sense.
certainly this free cash analysis is
Yeah.
like well under
Yeah.
the FinCom report.
yeah,
Sounds like we
totally.
have a plan.
The ARPA subgroup,
Well, that could be part of it.
you just
because-
slide it in that we're doing it. It's one sentence. And also, we're doing this subgroup, information's on the website.
Well, no,
But the free cash, I think, is really important, and I think that's easy. in the
well, I mean,
FinCom.
but I also think, you know, you know, this being a subcommittee under FinCom, that, you know, the ARPA, for the ARPA piece, it should,
Absolutely.
you should,
That's
it should, you know,
Yeah.
that is the, you know, the forum to be able to do it. Whether in April, you know, we'll know more about what we can and
Yep.
can't say and do at that point, but that's what I would.
Yeah, you're totally right.
I would love, as a town meeting member as well in April, I would love to see where we are with, so where's free cash projected to go, where are we, where's it projected to go? And debt within the levy and debt outside the levy, debt exclusions, in a chart. So it would be great to be able to have a roadmap, and I'm sure Sharon could help. Where's that cliff we think we're heading for, where we're gonna have to make a go or no-go decision? And you don't have to say the old word, but I don't feel like I've seen an analysis like that in a really long time. And now we're doing a lot this fall, so April would be like, okay, here's where we are, and here's where we're going. Are we within free cash tolerances, policies that we set, or within debt within the levy policies? We think we're heavy compared to our peers, or light? And I don't know if that would help to provide some insight, but that would be 3 measures, and then in the process of doing that, staff might have some other great ideas of things that they're keeping an eye on that could also be presented to town meeting. Because I would love to see, to keep an eye on the barometer, like the gas in the tank. I'm keeping an eye on, you know, is it full? Do we just get an influx, or when do we think, I think that's what we did last time when we were talking about the override, Bob, if I remember correctly.
Is that, I mean, to that point, Bob, are those the gauges that you typically, you kind of look at it? You know what I mean, like, some companies, you know, they look at their leverage ratio, and once they get to a certain point, then they start, okay, well, once we hit that, we pay down our debt, then we move into another phase. Is that, you know, from a town perspective, are those the types of metrics that you use in order to determine?
Well, the one metric we haven't had to use, may or may not have to going forward, is inflation. So we've been able to negotiate contracts or have non-union contracts that are well affordable in Prop 2.5 because of no inflation. But if inflation goes to a big number, you know, you're not gonna have any employees left, you pay them 1 or 2% a year.
Yeah.
And inflation is 7 or 8. I'm not saying it will be, I'm just saying that's a danger metric.
Maybe that's the only thing that uses up the override, because even speaking the word, just, I don't see support when people are saying, hey, you're not spending what you're taking in, this override was supposed to last 5 years, so there has to be, that would be the documented need, and it may not even be now, it may not be till, like, high school and wood and debt come off, and possible killer comes on, and it's not you, Hillary, anyway.
So it's not number. But actually today I was looking at the capital plan and discussed it a little this morning with the department heads. Because we are seeing clear inflation in capital.
Yeah.
It's costing more to do stuff.
We even saw that with, like, we had to approve, like, playground cost
Really.
improvements at Woodend at FinCom. Remember the end of June, it was like, just little things, they were already seeing supply costs going up.
So we're, you know, the capital plan over 10 years has a good healthy surplus. You know, some of the capital that's not technically in it could certainly fit in there within 10 years, except everyone wants it now, and it can't be for years 5 or 6. But that doesn't assume a whole lot of inflation. We usually have 2 or 3%, and we're wondering about that. And the other twist that we've never had to deal with before is just like, you know, when you go to the grocery store, you always expect to buy the can that's right on that shelf. Well, what happens when it's not? There's a real shortage of water mains, and we're wondering, do we need to start stockpiling stuff that we won't be able to get when there's an emergency? So that's the world we live in now. And that's gonna be a really challenging discussion. I mean, you know, people will understand because of their personal experience, but you're gonna buy what, and you don't even need it, yeah, we need to spend like $3 million to just store it. Yeah, and I'm not saying we're there, but we're talking about it, so. But generally speaking, the operating budgets are very healthy right now, never mind what the free cash is. You know, you just saw a 3.85% increase, that's really good. We have more new growth to come that's already in the pipeline that will help that go on for at least another year and maybe two. And then it's hard to see beyond that what may happen.
This is all making me sound like the guidance of how much free cash we're supposed to keep should go up, but I don't know. Like, is that take into account inflation?
I mean, it's the same argument as what you just said earlier about the water reserves.
Yeah.
It's like, good thing we had that. Those things are starting to cost more, so yeah.
I was actually thinking about our free cash balance in terms of the recent decision by town meeting to purchase a lot of land for $500,000. What a nice position, thank you for coming. What a nice position we were in as a town.
Yep.
An incredible opportunity presented itself, it's very unusual, and we were able to just write a check. Like, oh, we would like that land, boom. If we maintained the 7% FinCom reserve and we were right at our policy, I think that becomes a harder decision to make. It becomes harder to say we're gonna take that opportunity because you go under your own set policy. So I think having that cushion allows you to react to opportunities.
Yeah, even if you don't know what excess means, you knew that 500,000 was fine.
Yep.
Yes.
17 odd.
Yep,
Yep.
exactly.
Good.
So like in terms of inflation, Bob, like, do we have like, so we don't have COLAs in any like our employee contracts or unions?
It's not tied to inflation. We negotiate specific COLAs every 3 years or whatever, but with the unions.
Okay,
And they're generally in the 1s or 2s.
okay, but they'll obviously would
But they
renegotiate
don't
much
get like
higher.
anything automatic because of inflation.
Okay, okay. So we have a lag there, but it would catch up quick.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you have the
we're good
risk of
for
the
2
employees
more years.
leaving too, obviously, yeah, so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
okay.
good for the next budget year and then the following one after that. And then non-unions are done every year, so in theory you could have a little earlier risk there. You know, we're not hiring because of pay. We're not retaining because of pay. And I'm not complaining. We're hiring and retaining because of reputation and working conditions. I've lost track of how many employees have gone and come back because the grass is not greener. The pay is a lot more, and one of them that just left for the second time said, oh, if the pay gap was $7 an hour, if you could just meet me in the middle, I'd want to come back. That's really nice to hear that. And so that, you know, with all due respect, the money is not the most important thing to keep going. It's vital, but you know, the culture is more important.
Any other, kind of, questions or comments on the subcommittee proposal? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, just like a general question, like, the thing I struggle with is like if it should be like top down or like bottom up, or maybe it needs to meet in the middle, because I feel like it's, all of a sudden we got this money, we won the lottery, right? And if you want to invest in a portfolio, you say, okay, how can I optimize this, right? And do you need to have some type of high level model that goes, okay, here's the major themes like infrastructure, productivity, sustainability. I'm sure folks could come up with a list, but start like from the top and not get into like allocating like here and there, but say, okay, as a town, where would we spend that money? And I'm sure it's going to overlap with other capital projects, but then do a simple like rating of, okay, well, this is an infrastructure project. We know we were going to do it anyway, so that gets like an 8 or 9, right? And maybe there's some way, I'm not trying to overcomplicate like but also I think give people like more transparency, because I just wonder a couple of years when people are going to say like, okay, why did you do this project versus that, and not have any like, I don't know. Like,
I think it's a great point, Joe, and I think that there should be some paper trail and, kind of transparency as far as how you reach any type of decision that's out there. And I think that, whether it's, you kind of, I think there is at least from my opinion, it's have a marriage of the two, where, you have these kind of broader themes as far as what the grant, kind of entails. But then you have to overlay that to what, the the town needs, because, you know, every town municipality is gonna be different. So I think it's, you know, but I go back to the last part of what you said, as the guiding principle. I wanna be able to have someone to say, at any point in time, well, this is why we did it. You know, we did this, and here are the reasons why. Like, you know, those 2 and 3 bullets afterwards are just as important to me than the headline. Because I think that's not, you know, the real hidden benefit to doing this, you know, just in general, is to bring everyone together, show that, you know, a thoughtful, transparent process, and that there's, you know, that everything was considered, every part of the community was considered, and that's why we've done X, Y, and Z. And I think the other part of it too is, hopefully it doesn't just focus on one of the projects you do. You look at that in its totality. Like, yeah, we did, you're questioning this project, but we also did this one, and this one as well. And, you know, and hopefully they all hit, you know, the whole community. And I think that's the, you know, again, really Pollyanna and really, you know, kind of hopeful as far as that's where you land. But that's really what I think is the goal, is that, you know, you have this opportunity to be able to influence so many different, you know, parts of the community. Hopefully all of, you know, the community in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I think you have enough ideas where you could start pressure testing the themes too, to see if you get the right themes, right? And then, so.
Yep. I mean, and one of the things too, you know, and a lot of this is, you know, obviously based on kind of large, you know, kind of, you know, capital projects and things of that nature, but that really shouldn't be all of it. You know, there's other things that we could, you know, that are eligible for this, and, you know, maybe there's, you know, things that hit other parts of the community, you know, whether it's, you know, the food pantry and seniors and other ways that you could be able to do this that, you know, isn't, you know, kind of completely, you know, water infrastructure. You know, using it all of it for water and for nothing else. You know, there's other things that you can do there. And I hopeful that's what'll, you know, kind of come out of this, you know, this discussion. Yeah.
But I think just by trying to rate them too, like if you don't think if it's something that is going to create like operating, you know, budget challenges, then, you know, that gets a lower rating, right? But if it's got like one time with some type of productivity improvement behind it, that's going to lower your operating costs supposedly, like that. I don't know. Like I think any way that you can try to have some type of rating, you know, model around it would give you a little like help in terms of transparency and explaining it later. So.
Yep. Good enough.
Again, we met as department heads this morning for a while. One of the things I talked about was the capital plan and how we should come up with a more visible way of how we make decisions, because we all understand it, but we never really had to explain it to anyone. One of the biggest single things we look at is risk. And risk measures lots of different things. One of them is money, but the most important one to me is safety.
Yep.
So the reason a ladder truck comes up high on the list is because it's safety. You know, it was probably okay for another year, but if it isn't, what's the risk?
Yep.
Well, it's not just safety of the employees, it's safety of the community. You know,
Yep.
Saugus's ladder truck is, you know, 17 minutes away, things like that.
Yep.
But we don't write any of that down, we just talk about it.
Yep.
And then saving money, you know, investing effectively in capital to save money is always good. That's, you know, the performance contracting is the simplest example of that.
Yep.
But buying a piece of equipment before the old one starts to cost you too much. And when I got here, in those years' dollars, we were spending over $100,000 each in 2 DPW maintenance lines. We're still spending about that 16 years later because we improved the capital plan significantly. So unlike business, we don't have all this fancy software to measure all this. We can measure other things, but not that. But we think that way without being able to easily point to a document and a piece of paper that says this is why. And that's what I've been thinking about, trying to leave more of a kind of breadcrumb trail, where these are the ways you think about capital. And we all do it as a group, especially when John Doherty was here, because it was instinct, that just happened. And it's not like, and right or wrong, we don't build up a capital plan from scratch every year. There is one. What do we need to change? the first few years when I was here, it was much different. It's like there's hardly any capital plan. What do we do? And the first 5 years were much different than since then. So it's kind of not zero-based in capital. It's like, we've already discussed this. We've already said. Now, is there a reason why any of this should change? Absolutely. But we already agreed this was the order of this kind of equipment. Now, let's talk about it. Has something changed? So it's a complicated thing, and it's really hard to explain because a lot of it's just experience and kind of gut feel.
Yep.
I think with the upcoming change in leadership, though, that's a really vital thing to be for the next person in your role, is to say, here's how we've done it. So they're not looking at a spreadsheet and going, how are these decisions made?
Right, yeah,
That's-
I thought
that would be
about
really
that.
important.
Yeah, no, I think that's, yeah, I agree. Any other questions or comments on? Go ahead,
Just,
Jeff.
I understand Gene's concern that we really need to get the ARPA stuff, that's the time-sensitive one. But I struggle with the idea of removing capital planning from the subcommittee to just make it focused on ARPA, because there are a lot of questions that, we say this is a really high priority, and maybe it's gray in ARPA, right? So we're like, well, if we're only focused on ARPA and that's our top priority, then yes, we'll say we're gonna try and do that with ARPA. But if this committee continues to have a larger scope, then we can say, we looked also at free cash, we know we have this much free cash, and this really makes more sense in free cash. And the other thing is that, that $17 million, like people have said, it's really calling out to town meeting to say, and the taxpayers of the town to say, why is there so much money there? So I think it's important also to have, to start work on looking at that $17 million. So I guess I don't like the suggestion that this subcommittee be retitled ARPA only.
Well, I mean, so, I definitely respect that part of it. The two thoughts that I had, and I'll let others kind of speak to it. I do think maybe this is, to your point, expanding the discussion on whether it's free cash or stabilization, maybe that should just be a standing agenda item for us. And that's, so that's, whether we take from, this ARPA subcommittee or other things that are out there, and we just, are incorporating that into our agenda item, to be able to kind of discuss that, because I think it's, kind of vitally important. We've already spent a lot of time talking about it just in, just tonight. So that was kind of point one. The second point, though, as far as what I really kind of hope happens here is that if we're focused in the subcommittee to kind of talking about ARPA and what's done, again, things that will fall out of this ARPA discussion because they're in the gray or they're a hard no. If there's other, if it gets back to this other point, well, but there are some yeses. Well, then that kind of frees up whatever spot that hard yes is, within the capital plan, to be able to kind of almost reprioritize what was in the original list. So say there was, Project A and Project B, everyone really loves Project B and would love to be able to do it, but it's not gonna be able to be paid for in ARPA. But it, and Project B was 6 years out, Project A was 2 years out. Well, now maybe you can move Project B into 2 years, because you can pay for ARPA, you can use that first Project A for ARPA. That's what I'm hopeful that'll happen, and I think it kind of hits on your point, and it could be, a free cash thing, it could not be a free cash thing, it could just be happens within the capital plan. But I'm hopeful that this discussion not only figures out what we do as it relates to ARPA, but then just, we just have a, kind of a group discussion that we really haven't ever had previously, and this is just a catalyst to be able to do it, where we're talking about a lot of different projects that are out there and figuring out how we should prioritize them as a community. Yeah, go ahead.
So, yeah, I hear that, Jeffrey, because I've gone back and forth on it. I originally was, oh my God, just ARPA, because that's very finite. This is a new kind of structure that really hasn't been done in the community before. Let's keep it focused. And then I shifted to sort of what you're thinking, is you can't do it without looking at the whole thing. I've landed back kind of where Ed was just saying is, if this group can function effectively to figure out how to recommend to the select board how to spend ARPA funds, I think it could potentially be a model moving forward. I don't think I've got in the project plan that it dissolves in December, and I think that's important. I think when you set up a subcommittee, you're like, here's the charge of the subcommittee, it's gonna form, here's the deadline, then it, but I would be really interested in December if this works well in having this exact conversation. How can you use a structure like this? It's sort of a financial forum structure, but a little bit more focused, moving forward. So I don't see them as mutually exclusive, like we're gonna do one way or the other. I see it as more phased. Let's try this approach with the ARPA funds. Clearly, this conversation over on the side with FinCom about free cash that might influence it, might even become part of it. And then a year, see how that goes. I'm very open to the possibility that this might be a path forward for a much broader look at capital, like an ongoing different process. I'm open to that.
Yep. Yeah, Bob?
I don't really have an opinion of what you call it or what you do, but as long as your first steps are a broad discussion and gathering information, there's a capital plan as a starting point. What's not on the capital plan? What are all the other sort of projects, one-time ideas that aren't there? You gotta get them listed.
Yeah.
Because you can't start deciding more like Jeff is thinking until you see the whole picture.
Yeah.
You don't just kind of go alphabetically through a list and then go, oh, look at that, we've already got to 7.6 million, let's stop.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
then
think you're
again, that's
both
to
kind
Joe's
of
point
right.
too, yeah, as far as how you
Yeah.
prioritize them and how you rank them and things of that nature, but, again, you have to start with a base of something.
And, you start with the capital plan just because it's simple, and then, but you gotta ask the both elected boards for other things, like the all-day kindergarten wouldn't have occurred to many people. There are other things that, and Sharon can be helpful, well, this was just approved. But you really need a good inventory before you can start deciding.
Yeah.
Let's throw, we used to do that, and trust me, this discussion has happened many times, where it was usually, what can we cut?
Yeah.
Not how do we spend.
Right.
But, you go around with the whiteboards, you have all sorts of lists, and you just have brainstorming sessions. And you just say, what kind of things would you like? And you ask the community that, you're gonna get a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with ARPA. But at least then you know. So it's been a while, the select board did a very good survey after the first override attempt failed recently as to why it didn't fail, and just kind of getting the sense, and they got over 2,000 responses, which was pretty good, and got a lot of information, which was very helpful for them, which led to economic development for one thing. You guys might think about, how do you want to gather information, aside from what your committee itself can do, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's been, there's been various surveys that have gone out. I mean, there was that one on the override, which people were pretty motivated to speak their piece, because I think people had reasons not to vote, but I know, like the park committee, I got a postcard in the mail with QR codes, and there were 2 things on it. I don't know if that has improved the response rate on that. I mean, I don't know. I think this is something where it's like, show your input of how we're gonna spend this money. It might draw in more responses. Or you could just say, look, we have a split, here's the 2, I hate to shut out boards, but like the 2 major boards in town, select board and school committee. If you had, 30% of this, what would you spend it on? You come up with the list.
Yeah.
But then again, do you say, okay, are those the only boards that count? Do we think that other boards, town forest or trails or whatever, everybody would have wish lists, and how many boards, do we just focus on the elected boards? Is that accountable to citizens and not the appointed ones? I don't even know how far you go with that, because everyone, I'm sure, has wish lists.
They'll never spend the money.
And I would add to that the importance of reaching out to staff, and I don't quite know the mechanism for that, but I'm really interested. Folks doing the work often are the ones who know, if I had $50,000, here's what I'd buy, and and to Joe's point, it would radically improve my productivity. No one in the community is gonna know that, the person doing that job is gonna know that, so I think there has to be a mechanism to get staff feedback too.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have that with the school committee, because the superintendent would know what the staff needs,
Yep.
and presumably at the town side, the town manager knows what the staff
Exactly.
needs, and tells select board that, I think, but I don't know if it's the same mechanism.
It's a little different.
It isn't the same kind of,
It's a little different just because under the charter and under the state law, the school committee has a budget and the select board advises the town manager
Right,
on
it's
things
not
they
the
would like
same.
in the budget.
yeah.
So the process is definitely set up different.
And the school committee, it's almost like an untouchable budget, it's all up, all down.
Yep.
Nobody can line item what, if they wanna spend it all on watermelon, you know, whatever, nothing we can do. Other than, you know, I'm just making that up, like food, I'm thinking of cold food, cause it's warm here.
Any other questions or comments?
I think it's a
Good
good plan.
luck.
Yeah. It's easy to write a plan on paper, isn't it?
Exactly. It's,
It'd be nice to have like 4 expensive things that just use it up, right? And then it's
Hoping
easy
I can come up
decisions.
with that, right? A lot of it would be water.
So,
Minutes.
so when you started this out,
I made a motion.
you made a motion.
Did
Yes,
you second it? Someone seconded it.
Joe
Joe.
seconded.
Joe.
Joe
Oh,
seconded.
yeah.
So, at this point, we are actually voting to create the subcommittee, correct?
To have the
Are we-
form that's listed under November?
Yes, to
Are we
form,
voting on Jean's amendments?
yes. If that's acceptable to the group, we could pull them out individually. We could pull them out. I think the 2 amendments I made were the changing the name to the ARPA subcommittee and changing the listing of chairs as member to just members of the various boards. I believe that's all I
Yes.
changed.
So I'm okay with removing chair and just having members, but I object to renaming it to ARPA subcommittee.
So why don't I make 2 separate amendments?
Let's do
Does
that.
that work?
Yeah, that works.
All right, so,
Fine,
so-
yeah.
does that work, Jeffrey?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Do I have to withdraw my motion then?
We're not fancy around here. Don't worry
Oh,
about
thank goodness.
I object.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, so, yeah, you do the amendments before the main motion. This is like town meeting. I need Alan here. Okay, so I'll start with the easy one. I move to modify the proposed FinCom subcommittee in our packet by changing under November 2021, any listing of chair to simply read member of.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, we'll go to a vote. All right, so, sorry, let me just get a. And this is the chair one. Jackie,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
and Ed, yes. All right, so that passes 8-0. So then, next amendment.
Yes. Move to change the name of the subcommittee to proposed FinCom ARPA subcommittee.
Second?
Thanks, Joe.
And if I can just
Yep.
speak to this. So I'm comfortable with this amendment. And part of it, I spoke about this at the beginning, part of the challenge with this is I wish we could get the group at the table to say things, to have this conversation, right? Like, how do you feel about the scope of the project? I think it's possible we'll get these 7 people plus staff at the table and wanna change the scope, which I think would be coming back to FinCom and saying the group has met and they wanna change the scope. So we're kind of relying on conversations that have happened between Ed and myself, the chair of the select board and the chair of the school committee. So we're kind of, it's awkward, right? We're trying to kind of feel out. So I'll just share that my sense, and it is my sense, is that there was comfort with limiting the scope to start with. So I would be open to changing the scope, but I would rather do that with this group that's formed as opposed to FinCom kind of dictating that this is gonna be a broader thing than what I think there's broad agreement on, which is the ARPA piece, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But I have no idea, that's my sense of the conversations. It may be that I haven't spoken to the majority of the school committee, I haven't spoken to the majority of the select board, maybe they do agree. So we're kind of guessing a little bit.
You may determine it just is even impossible to get through all the ARPA stuff and you don't wanna take on anything else. You may not be able to decide until you've had a few meetings too.
That's possible as well. And I
Well-
really do like the idea that this could be a phased project. You focus on the ARPA funds, but to Bob and Ed's point, you're gonna end up with a whole list of stuff that isn't funded. You're not just gonna throw that in the
Yeah,
trash,
that's a good way of looking at it, like, what's left over, then
then
phase
what are
two
you
of
gonna
the
do
group
with this
could do.
list? Exactly. It's not that you're gonna throw it out and say, well, they didn't get funded by ARPA, we're never gonna talk about those again. What do you do with them? And that becomes the phase two. And that's a discussion, I think, for after the ARPA work is done with, what do we wanna do with this? Does it go to the FinCom because that would traditionally where it would go? Is this group structure working? Should we have some standing group like this? So I like sort of where
It's
I'm at.
kind of like how the ad hoc HRAC, did that turn into the HRAC, you know, what was formed for a purpose, then it got extended to look into other things. I know it's a completely different area, but they were looking at certain issues in town, and then they said, no, it's good to have a standing group that,
You learn.
but yeah, they learned after doing things for a while.
Yeah, I'm guessing too, if you had something that was really high priority that didn't meet the opera, you know, requirements, right? It would come here and it could be like a free cash question, right? So they wouldn't wait a year, right, you know, so.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, that's a good point.
So-
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, so.
Jeffrey, you had your hand up too?
Yeah, two further thoughts. One is that given that ARPA funds are under the purview of the select board, I think it's a little odd perhaps for FinCom to try and create an ARPA subcommittee. And if you're gonna change the title, you would probably need to go back into the various pieces of this, you know, and go to the February-March thing and it says, step 5, subcommittee discusses both ARPA and excess free cash. So if you're gonna retitle it to the ARPA subcommittee, then you need to go back and strike all excess free cash wording from the rest of the proposal.
I guess I thought that was implied, but yes.
So it's more significant amendments. So you would say an amendment to strike out the word free cash, or like how do you make it?
I would suggest you decide what you wanna do and then do amendments at another time, because otherwise you're gonna be here all night.
Yep. And to your point, Jeffrey, I feel that the conversations have been very collaborative and very positive, and I'm looking to Ed, you know, for validation. You know, obviously, if the select board or the school committee had any, like, we are not comfortable with this, we don't do it. Like, we can't force anyone to the table. The approach, I certainly think, has been really like, hey, would this work? And I have not heard any feedback that there was discomfort. But if there were,
Yeah.
then we don't do it.
Yeah,
I can only speak for myself. I'm just trying to help solve the problem.
Yeah, good.
In terms of moving a document forward, you have two paths. One is to keep coming back to your full board and vote on it. The other is just to delegate it to one or two people or whatever on a quorum and say, we trust you, this is the mission, go off and create a document, show us what it is someday. The board does that occasionally, not a lot, but occasionally. You know, we have this thing like the real estate negotiation. One person, you go do this thing, and some people just get a task. And then come back to the board with a full vote on how to accomplish the thing. But not necessarily, you don't have to come back to the full FinCom with the wording if you don't want to, if the rest of the, you know, majority of FinCom doesn't want to. So it's really up to you. I just don't want you to get bogged down in all this bureaucracy, if you will.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean,
it's not important.
No, and the one thing that I would say to Jeffrey is to reiterate, you know, kind of Jean's point. The conversations that I've had with the select board chair and the school committee chair have really been, in kind of both situations, very open. And now, you know, we've kind of, and even to the point now where we're, you know, kind of talking amongst the 3 and 4 of us, you know, to come together, is even sharing some of this information here. And so again, reading the tea leaves, everything has been all facing and pointing in the same direction as far as, you know, and you know, and again, really hopeful. I mean, I think we might have shared it in either one of the last couple of meetings, but one of the real big, you know, objectives, and maybe it's, you know, it's actually the second bullet point of the secondary objective, is the collaborative work. And so that is ringing true from the outset. And we've always had it, you know, between, you know, the schools in town already, and probably, you know, less so, not less so, but it's never really had to happen from the select board and school committees. You know, they kind of operate separately, and they're designed that way, and they do. This one, brings them together, and again, I think it's one of those things, you know, it's, you know, good for the town, for everyone to be able to see that both the select board and the school committee and, you know, town and staff can all work collaboratively together on this piece of it. So just to kind of reiterate your point, Gene, you know, it's, you know, changing the, you know, the name under the ARPA, I don't think will preclude us at any point in time from expanding or contracting your points on this.
I may have a solution. Let me try this. Let's take this document off the table, because this was really sort of a collaboration between me and Ed and a little bit of Bob, like back and forth, like how would this look, what would the key dates be? What if FinCom merely voted a subcommittee into existence with the following members, we list out the members, this committee initially will be charged with determining the use of the ARPA funds, and will be open to changing the scope if the subcommittee desires. And if they do that, we would have to bring that back to the FinCom to say, hey, the subcommittee has met a few times, we really think we should be taking a holistic approach, then FinCom could vote on that change of scope. And that way we're not talking about any particular wording. This document, because the way I sort of view this document is at the first meeting we hand it out and we pull out pens. Like imagine this document's gonna change a lot. This is one person's or three people's thinking. So maybe we just limit the motion to, we would like to create a committee to work with the select board's, these members to solve this problem.
I like that idea, actually.
Well, it matches the agenda, so it wouldn't be an open meeting law.
Because it's important.
No, it says discuss and vote to establish a FinCom ARPA subcommittee. Add like a few more words, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah. So let me try it, and then we can discuss if it works. I withdraw, this is my third withdrawal. I withdraw that other terrible motion I made. Let's try it again, third time's a charm. I move to create a subcommittee of the Finance Committee whose primary focus will be the use of ARPA funds that will be consisted of 3 members of the Finance Committee, 2 members of the Select Board, 2 members of the School Committee. That will be the group, but we will expect the following staff to be deeply involved in this group: the school superintendent, school director of finance, town manager, and town accountants.
Second.
Thank you, Eric. A lot of silence there.
The only other thing I'll add, I keep saying the only other thing I'll add, but the only other thing I'll add is that certainly envisioned within this was regular reports back out. So 3 members of the FinCom would be on this committee, but they should be coming back to FinCom at all of our meetings and saying, here's where we're at, here are the changes we made. So, and we would expect the select board is doing that and the school committee is doing that. So this isn't like this group is gonna be created and come back in a year. There should be like really regular updates.
Well, I would envision this as, this would encompass our liaison report.
Oh, yeah.
It would be, you know, for anyone that was on this subcommittee.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, Bob.
And again, as you develop a schedule, as those 7 develop a schedule, you may want to create a couple more financial forums during the year, not just in the fall.
Definitely.
I've gone through that other people work.
Making a note.
It's not happened very often.
Usually my favorite thing. Oh,
Yep.
the only other one more thing I'll add. I know of at least one community that has a steering committee like this. We're not the only community kind of struggling with who do you bring to the table in a productive way to spend these funds. So that there's at least one other community that has a ARPA, they're called an ARPA steering committee. It's the same concept.
Any other questions on Jean's amendment? Yeah, we're calling it Jean's amendment, by the way.
Third motion.
All right, we'll go to a vote then. Jackie still on, or did she drop?
Yes.
Oh,
I
sorry,
vote
Jackie.
yes.
Thanks, Jackie. Sorry, I didn't see you on the screen. Mark,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Marianne,
Yes?
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Ed. Yes, that's 8-0. All right, so
Want another motion?
So do we give Jean the task of transcribing her amendment from the video, the exact wording for the minutes?
Jackie will do that.
Thank you.
All right.
Got it, you're all set.
Best, Jackie.
Approve the meeting minutes dated October 20th, 2021?
Do you want to appoint members tonight or not? There's no reason you have to.
I
just
don't think
wanna
there's
bring
an
that up.
urgency
Okay.
on that. Oh, that's your call, Mr. Chair.
No, let's hold off, because our next meeting is just,
December
budget
something.
meetings, which is like, December 8th is a Wednesday, 14th is a Tuesday. And then school committee budget meetings, whatever they are.
so is our next meetings, our next meeting is the budget meetings?
Yeah, I have December 1st, save the date, finance committee
Okay.
meeting. Something else
I
is
have December
December
1st FinCom too, but it could be an old note.
I think something else is December 1st, yeah. So, I'm confused.
So could that, so, yeah,
Do that.
well, yeah, I mean, but, so so let's hold off and do that. We'll add that as an agenda item for, our next meeting.
May I ask, for the select board, do you want the select board to appoint members by a certain day? It's obviously up to Karen to put it on the agenda, but just for guidance.
Well, yeah, because I mean, then that got to the point where, she didn't feel that they were gonna be able to look from an agenda perspective until January. And so, my assumption is that they wouldn't have been assigned any select board members until that time.
I don't know, I'm not sure what you discussed, how she's thinking about
Well, the select board has meetings on November 9th and November 23rd per their calendar, though they look pretty full. The 23rd's got a bunch of hearings.
it. And then there's 4 or 3 for sure in December, possibly 4.
Yeah, December 7th, 8th, 4th. I'm looking at their packet.
If the school committee and select board could get their people assigned by January, this FinCom actually has to appoint them, right? Because it's
Yeah.
our subcommittee, so they will say, these two people we
So we
think would
can
be
be
good,
the
and then we
last to
can.
appoint our own members.
Yeah, so we'll end up appointing them, but what I'm thinking is if we have the appointments by the end of January, then the group can start meeting in February and March, which I think is important if we're gonna hit that April town meeting date. So I think
And
January.
use up your Zoom meetings while there's snowstorm season while you can.
Yeah. So I think the end of January, if it's possible. If they can't, it's budget season, then we push it off, but I think January would be ideal.
I was thinking earlier than that, but yeah, so, yeah,
Earlier would be better, for sure, but they've got a lot on their
I
plates.
just know from experience, putting 7 people together with calendars and logistics for schedules is hard.
Yeah.
The sooner you can do it, the better off you are, Jen. But you're also not urgently needing to do something when like May. This is a long-term thing, so.
yeah. So you, Bob, did you ask that, so is that something that I'd have to give that guidance to both school
You
committee
should, yeah.
and to select board, so that's something, and I could just do that
Yeah, just
separately,
informally.
informally, okay. All right, well, I have an idea, I mean, end of January is as a last resort. And I think it'll be, I'll talk to both chairs and then, and get their temperature as far as that goes. And again, not knowing the process that either of them will have to go through. I just don't know that, so,
You appoint members that forgot to attend that night. That's the tried and true method.
there you go. Right, perfect. So that's helpful. And so, just before we do minutes, so if our next one is 12-1, would that also be budget stuff too, or did we have 12-1 and then there'd be another one on 12-8?
12-1 would just be only FinCom, because the board is doing nothing, the budgets won't start until 12-8.
Okay. So we may not need 12 one. Okay, that's, but,
So, this is Jackie, just a question here, then are we on for 12-1, 12-8, and 12-14? Is that,
I would say 12-8 and 12-14, yes. 12-1's up to you.
yeah, I think 12, yeah, that's, I was just gonna say the same thing. 12-8 and 12-14 definites, 12-1 will be TBD. You know, that one's the one that will be in flux. We might not need 12-1. And if we don't need 12-1, then, you know, we could easily add this agenda item to 12-8. You know, as far as voting on members. But we'd have time to be able to do that again. I don't foresee, well, you know, who knows? You know, we didn't think we need this meeting, but we ended up needing this one, so.
True.
I guess that's good. But yeah, so Jackie, I think, did that answer your question, right? 12-8 and 12-14 definites, 12-1.
yes, thank you.
Cool, any other questions? We can go on to minutes.
I'll try again. Approve the meeting minutes dated October 20th, 2021.
A second. Any questions on minutes? None appearing, we'll go to the vote. Mark,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes,
Mary Ann,
Yes,
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Ed, yes. 8-0. So just before we wrap up, there was just something that for our next meeting, but just something I wanted to be able to, as an additional item, I want to put on, you know, kind of one of the addition, the next agenda for us to discuss is, Gina and I were talking about this, is possibly, you know, kind of updating, that's just how we're described, you know, like as it's on the website, you know, maybe just updating that, you know, that information that's on there, you know, kind of definition of FinCom, tasks, et cetera, you know, things that, you know, that we have out there. I don't know last time it's been done, you know, and that, you know, and that's not a
1892.
along Walkersburg Pike. So yeah, so it was just something that, you know, I just felt like it was, you know, something that might be a good project, you know, for us to take on as a group, and maybe some specific members, you know, kind of as a you know, kind of a side thing if they wanted to be able to leave it. So just, you know, something to be able to consider, you know, being able to kind of research it a little bit, and but leave it up to folks to think about if that's something they want to be able to take on or lead. Then, you know, obviously it's something to discuss for next meeting. But just an idea that's out there.
what do you mean, like the description on the town page, the purpose of finance committee, is that what you mean?
Yep.
I just think we ought to have a financial forum presentation that is later than 2016, under news and announcements.
I did see that as well.
Places.
Go ahead, Bob. Yeah.
We're actually launching a new website the week before I leave, the week after. They're teasing me. So it'd be good to have any of your feedback on content soon. Not urgent, because the content can change, but just like, I can't really describe the style, it's just different. It's much more interactive, it's much more linked to social media. It'll be easier on the eye, it'll just be easier to navigate and use. What we found with a consultant and a large committee is there's way too much stuff on our website,
Yeah.
you know, and that makes it hard to keep up.
Oh, yeah, but I know where it all is.
I can
You're gonna have
find
an
it.
adventure looking for the new stuff.
Well,
Yeah,
one
so
of
It's
the,
gonna be lost, because we can't move it all.
the archive's gonna be gone?
Yeah. We'll always have the old website as needed, we can tell you the secret link. But
That's
we
funny
are
because I
the
do.
content.
I'm sure I'm not up to Mary Ann's level, but I can definitely. I've now figured out. I'm like,
Oh, yeah, hey, that's,
You know, because there's a lot of,
It's there and it's keyword searchable.
Yeah, it's a
and
lot of
everyone thinks
different-
I remember everything, but I'm like, no, I just have fast fingers. But I do remember where it was.
Yeah,
the
no,
new
it just-
website shouldn't hurt that.
yeah, it's a lot of good content there.
That's kind of a cool, I didn't realize that, but that's kind of a cool thing. I think, yeah, I think the description of FinCom's a little terse, like it's a little, it's accurate, but it's
Yeah,
a little terse.
might actually be from the charter.
I think it, yeah, it feels very legalese, and, yeah, I think there's a good way to
More friendly.
explain what FinCom is and what our role is a little nicer.
Yeah, marry it, and again, you know, the thought too is, you know, possibly marry what other towns, you know, how they describe it too, things of that nature too. I mean, obviously we're better, but, you know what I mean, but, you know, but to, you know, just make sure that we're accurate.
But the website reflects that.
Exactly, there we go, that's exactly it.
I still think this website's easier than the school website because the best part is the calendar, because things pop up and the links to what you need are there.
Yeah.
And they don't have that going.
I do love that. I've used that a lot on the town website.
We're actually gonna have two calendars, one as you see it, and a second one for community events. To the extent we can figure out a way to gather those.
Wow, good luck.
But then you hear, you know, you mouse over on our website and you see everything that's going, and like on the school side, you wouldn't know, oh, this meeting is at the same time as this PTO meeting, is at the same time as
Oh, yeah.
these town meetings. It's nice to say, okay, this is everything that's happening next Tuesday, whether you can make it all, you know what everything is there.
That's an interesting question, I don't know that level of detail on it.
So yeah, so I just wanna make sure that, you know, that was just something else, kind of under the umbrella of, you know, if it's an opportunity to be able to do something, let's take advantage of it. Again, not because we're not busy, but, you know, but something to look at. So I'll make a point to have that on, I'll work with Jackie to make sure that's on, our next agenda, whether it's the first of the year. Any other questions, anything, other comments from members? All right, I'll take it.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All right, Mark,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Joel,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Ed, yes. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Oh, no, they were doing, Jack's anti-cake. So, or he's actually anti-chocolate, so we,
Oh my
so-
God.
yeah, no, it's not my son. So he,